Jake Morrison wiped the sweat from his forehead as he watched his crew finish pouring concrete for the new apartment building in Denver. The summer heat was brutal, but Jake had worked in worse conditions during his 8 years as a Marine. Now, 3 years after leaving the service, he found construction work kept his hands busy and his mind focused. The radio on his belt crackled with news reports about strange lights in the sky, but Jake ignored it. People saw UFOs every week in Colorado. What caught his attention was how his crew had stopped working and were all staring upward. Jake looked up and felt his stomach drop. 3 massive ships hung in the afternoon sky, each one easily the size of a football stadium. They were not from Earth. The ships had a smooth, curved design that seemed to flow like water frozen in metal. No human technology could keep something that large floating in the air so quietly. "Everyone off the site," Jake called to his crew. "Go home to your families." His men did not argue. They grabbed their tools and ran to their trucks. Jake stayed, behind, studying the alien vessels through the small binoculars he kept in his truck. Old habits from the Marines made him count the ships, estimate their size, and look for weapons. He saw what looked like sensor arrays, but no obvious gun ports. The ships began to descend slowly toward the open field outside the city. Jake drove toward them, staying far enough back to avoid any danger, but close enough to see what happened. He was not the only curious person. Hundreds of cars lined the roads around the landing site. The largest ship touched down first, followed by the other 2. They landed so gently that they barely disturbed the grass beneath them. A section of the main ship's hull became transparent, and figures moved inside. After 10 minutes, a ramp extended to the ground. The first alien to walk down the ramp was tall and thin, with pale blue skin and large black eyes. It wore what looked like a flowing robe made of silver fabric. Behind it came other creatures of different shapes and sizes, but all of them moved carefully, like they were afraid of breaking something. Jake noticed how they all wore masks over their faces and walked very slowly, as if the simple act of standing upright was difficult for them. When one of them stumbled slightly on the ramp, 2 others rushed to help it. Military helicopters arrived within an hour, followed by government officials in black cars. Jake watched from his truck as soldiers set up a security perimeter around the landing site. The aliens waited patiently, making no aggressive moves. They seemed more interested in studying the grass and rocks around their ship than in the growing crowd of humans. By evening, Jake saw news reports that the aliens had requested a meeting with world leaders. They claimed to represent something called the Galactic Council and wanted to welcome Earth into their peaceful community of worlds. The government was asking for volunteers with military backgrounds to help with the first contact process. Jake thought about his younger sister Lisa, who lived in California with her 2 kids. He thought about the crew that worked for him, good men with families to feed. If these aliens were peaceful, that was great. If they were not, someone needed to be ready. He drove to the temporary command center that the military had set up near the landing site and volunteered. 2 days later, Jake found himself in a clean white room with 20 other volunteers, listening to a briefing from Colonel Patricia Hayes. She was a no-nonsense woman in her 50s who reminded Jake of his old drill sergeant. "The aliens call themselves the Veltari," she said, pointing to pictures on a screen. "They seem genuinely peaceful, but they are very concerned about something. They keep asking questions about our planet's environment and our physical capabilities." Jake raised his hand. "What kind of questions?" "They want to know how we survive in Earth's gravity. They are amazed that we can breathe our atmosphere without filters. They seem shocked that we drink plain water instead of some kind of processed fluid." The colonel paused. "They have been studying our medical records and are particularly interested in our bone density and muscle development." Dr. Elena Rodriguez, a scientist from the university, stood up to speak. She was a small woman with dark hair and intelligent eyes. "We have learned that most species in their galactic council evolved on what they call garden worlds, planets, with lower gravity, thinner atmospheres, and very stable climates. Earth is what they classify as a Class 12 death world." "Death world?" asked one of the other volunteers. "A planet so dangerous that most galactic species would die within hours of exposure," Dr. Rodriguez explained. Earth has high gravity, a dense atmosphere with reactive oxygen, dangerous radiation from our sun, extreme weather patterns and biological threats like bacteria and viruses that their immune systems have never encountered. Jake felt a chill run down his spine. So we are tougher than they expected? Much tougher, the doctor replied. Captain Zethrak, their leader, told me that humans are the most physically capable species they have ever encountered. Our muscle density is 5 times higher than the galactic average. Our bone strength is even more impressive. What we consider normal physical activity would be impossible for most of their people. Colonel Hayes continued the briefing. Tomorrow, a select group of you will visit their ship for a cultural exchange. Jake Morrison, you are on that list. Your military background and your calm response to this situation have impressed them. That night, Jake lay in his temporary quarters thinking about what he had learned. Humanity was alone in a galaxy full of species that had never faced real hardship. They had built an advanced civilization without war, without struggle, without the constant pressure that had shaped every human society. Jake wondered what other challenges existed in space that these peaceful aliens had never had to face. He thought about his time in Afghanistan, where he had learned that the most dangerous enemies were often the ones who looked weakest at first glance. As he drifted off to sleep, Jake made a mental note to pay close attention during tomorrow's visit. Something told him that humanity's introduction to galactic civilization was going to be more complicated than anyone expected. Jake stepped through the airlock onto the alien ship and immediately noticed how everything felt different. The gravity was lighter, making each step feel like he might float away. The air had a sweet smell that reminded him of flowers, but it felt thin in his lungs. He could breathe normally, but he sensed the atmosphere was much gentler than Earth's thick air. Captain Zethrak waited for them in what looked like a reception area. The alien leader was even taller up close, nearly 8 feet high, but so thin that Jake worried a strong wind might knock him over. His pale blue skin seemed almost transparent, and Jake could see delicate veins running beneath the surface. "Welcome aboard the Harmony's Edge," Zethrak said through a small device that translated his words into English. His voice sounded like music, high and soft. "We are honored to meet representatives of your remarkable species." Jake nodded politely. Beside him stood Commander Lisa Chen from the Navy and Dr. Kevin Barnes, who studied different cultures for the government. Lisa was a small woman with sharp eyes who seemed to notice everything around her. Kevin was tall and thin, with graying hair and a friendly smile that put people at ease. Zethrak led them through corridors that curved gently, with walls that glowed with soft light. Everything looked smooth and flowing, like the ship had been grown rather than built. Jake noticed there were no sharp corners anywhere, and all the surfaces felt warm to the touch. "Your ship is beautiful," Lisa said as they walked. "How long did it take to build?" "Build?" Zethrak looked confused. "We do not build our ships. We grow them using organic technology. This vessel took 50 of your years to reach maturity." They entered a large room with windows that showed the stars outside. Other aliens sat around tables that seemed to float in the air without any support. Jake counted at least 6 different species, all of them looking fragile and delicate compared to the humans. "Please sit and share a meal with us," Zethrak said, gesturing to chairs that adjusted themselves to fit the humans perfectly. The food was unlike anything Jake had ever seen. It looked like colorful soup that glowed with soft light. When he tasted it, the flavor changed constantly, shifting from sweet to salty to something completely new. It was pleasant but strange. "Tell us about your world," said another alien, this one covered in what looked like soft fur. "We have studied your historical records and find them disturbing." "Disturbing how?" Kevin asked, taking notes on a small tablet. "Your species has fought over 14,000 wars in recorded history," the furry alien replied. "You have weapons designed specifically to kill other humans. Your planet has predators that hunt and eat other creatures. How do you survive in such horror?" Jake almost laughed but caught himself. "We don't think of it as horror, it's just life. Competition makes us stronger." "Competition?" Zethrak's large eyes grew even wider. "You mean conflict between your own people?" "Sometimes," Lisa answered carefully. But we also compete in sports, in business, in science. We try to be better than we were yesterday. The aliens looked at each other with what Jake assumed was confusion. Their translator devices buzzed with rapid conversation in languages that sounded like singing birds. "Forgive us," Zethrak finally said. "Most species in the Galactic Council evolved on peaceful worlds. We have never experienced what you call competition. Our societies work together naturally without conflict." "That sounds nice," Jake said. "But what happens when someone disagrees with you, or wants something you have?" "Disagrees?" The furry alien tilted its head. "Why would someone disagree? We study problems until we find the correct answer. There is no need for disagreement." Jake felt a cold worry growing in his stomach. These aliens seemed genuinely innocent, like children who had never faced a real problem. "Captain Zethrak, you mentioned that you represent many species. Are all of them as peaceful as you?" The room became quiet. Several aliens looked at each other nervously. "Not all," Zethrak admitted. "There is one species that troubles us greatly. They call themselves the Krath Empire, and they come from what we believe is another death world, though not as extreme as yours." "Are they hostile?" Lisa asked, her military training showing in her direct question. "Very hostile," replied a new alien that looked like a tall insect with crystal wings. "They have conquered 17 worlds in the past 50 years. They use violence to take what they want instead of asking politely." Jake leaned forward. "What do you mean by conquered?" "They arrive in powerful ships and demand surrender," Zethrak explained. "When peaceful species refuse, the Krath destroy their cities and take control of their planets. They force the survivors to work for them." "Have you tried to stop them?" Kevin asked. "We have sent diplomatic missions," the insect alien said sadly. "The Krath killed our ambassadors and sent their heads back to us in boxes." Jake felt his old marine instincts awakening. "What about your military? Surely you have weapons to defend yourselves." "Military?" Zethrak looked confused again. "We have ships for transportation and tools for building. We never developed weapons because we never needed them." Lisa and Jake exchanged glances. These aliens had built an advanced civilization without ever learning to fight. They were completely helpless against any aggressive enemy. "How advanced are the Krath compared to you?" Lisa asked. "Their technology is less sophisticated than ours," the furry alien replied. "But they use it for violence while we use ours for exploration and learning. Their ships are faster and stronger. Their weapons can destroy our vessels easily." "Are they winning the war?" Jake asked. "There is no war," Zethrak said quietly. "War implies that both sides fight. We can only run away and hope they do not follow us." Jake stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the stars. Somewhere out there was a species that had learned to fight and was using that knowledge to terrorize peaceful civilizations. These gentle aliens had the technology to travel between stars, but they could not protect themselves from basic aggression. "Captain Zethrak," Jake said, turning back to the group. "Why did you come to Earth? What do you want from us?" The alien leader was quiet for a long moment. "We hope to find allies. Species from death worlds are rare, and they are usually the only ones capable of standing against the Krath. We thought perhaps your people might help us." "Help you how?" Lisa asked. "We are not certain," Zethrak admitted. "We have never had to ask for help with violence before. We do not know what we need." Jake looked around the room at the assembled aliens. They were advanced, intelligent, and completely innocent. They had built a peaceful society that spanned multiple worlds, but they were defenseless against anyone willing to use force. "Tell us more about the Krath," Jake said. "Everything you know. Their ships, their weapons, their tactics." As the aliens began to share their knowledge, Jake realized that humanity's introduction to galactic civilization was going to be very different from what anyone had expected. These peaceful species needed protectors, and Earth might be their only hope. Jake was studying star charts with Dr. Kevin Barnes when the alarm started screaming throughout the alien ship. Red lights flashed in the corridors, and the gentle background hum of the ship's engines changed to a high-pitched whine. Through the windows, Jake could see the other two council ships moving frantically, their smooth hulls glowing with energy. Captain Zethrak rushed into the room, his pale blue skin now almost white with fear. "They have found us," he said, his musical voice shaking. "The Krath Empire has tracked our ships to your solar system." Jake moved to the nearest window and looked out at the stars. At first he saw nothing unusual. Then 3 dark shapes dropped out of what looked like empty space, appearing as if they had torn holes in reality itself. The Krath ships were massive, each one twice the size of the council vessels, with angular black hulls covered in weapon ports and armor plating. "How did they find you?" Lisa Chen asked, her Navy training making her voice calm despite the obvious danger. "We do not know," Zethrak replied. "Our ships are designed to be invisible to most sensors. The Krath must have developed new tracking technology." The lead Krath ship began broadcasting a message. The alien translation device picked up the words and repeated them in mechanical English. "Weak flesh species, you will surrender your vessels immediately. Any resistance will result in your complete destruction. You have brought new slaves to us. We are pleased." Jake felt his jaw tighten. The voice speaking was rough and harsh, full of confident cruelty. He had heard that tone before from bullies and dictators who believed their power made them untouchable. "Are your ships armed?" Jake asked Zethrak. "We have some defensive systems," the alien captain replied, "but nothing designed to hurt other beings. We never learned to build weapons for war." Through the window, Jake watched as the Krath ships began their attack. Beams of red energy lanced out from the black vessels, striking the smaller council ships. The alien vessels' shields flared with blue light, but Jake could see they were already weakening under the assault. "We need to evacuate to Earth," Lisa said. "Your ships cannot fight them." "The Krath will follow us to your planet," Zethrak warned. "We cannot bring this danger to your people." "Our people are already in danger," Jake replied. "At least on Earth, we have a chance to fight back." The ship shuddered as a Krath energy beam grazed their hull. Sparks flew from control panels, and several aliens cried out in their musical voices. Jake could smell something burning in the walls. "All ships, prepare for emergency evacuation to the planet's surface," Zethrak commanded through his communication device. "We cannot win this battle." Jake watched through the window as one of the smaller council ships took a direct hit. Its shields collapsed, and the elegant vessel broke apart like a soap bubble. Debris and escape pods scattered in all directions, but Jake knew most of the crew was already dead. "How many people were on that ship?" he asked quietly. 300 beings from 12 different species," Zethrak replied, his large eyes filled with sadness. "They came here seeking peace and knowledge. Now they are gone." The Krath ships moved closer, their dark hulls bristling with weapons. Jake could see smaller craft launching from their bays, boarding pods designed to capture enemy vessels. The peaceful aliens had no experience with this kind of coordinated military assault. "Captain, we need to go now," Lisa urged. "Before they board us." Zethrak gave orders in his own language, and the ship began descending toward Earth. Jake felt the gravity change as they entered the atmosphere, and he could see the familiar blue and white of his home planet growing larger beneath them. But the Krath were not finished. Their ships followed the council vessels down, continuing their attack even as they entered Earth's atmosphere. Jake watched in amazement as the alien warships moved through Earth's thick air as easily as they traveled through space. "I thought, you said most galactic species could not survive on Earth," Jake said to Dr. Kevin Barnes. "Most cannot," Kevin replied, checking his tablet. "But the Krath come from a death world too, not as dangerous as Earth, but harsh enough to make them stronger than the peaceful species. The ship landed hard in the Nevada desert, far from many cities. Jake could feel the impact through the floor, and he knew the elegant vessel had not been designed for rough landings. Around them, other council ships were setting down wherever they could find open ground. "Everyone off the ship," Zethrak ordered. "The Krath will continue bombing from orbit." Jake helped carry injured aliens down the exit ramp. Their bodies were so light that he could lift 2 at a time without strain. In Earth's gravity, the peaceful aliens could barely walk, even with their breathing masks and environmental suits. The desert air felt good in Jake's lungs after the thin atmosphere of the ship. Lisa and Kevin stayed close to him as they moved, away from the landing site. Behind them, other council ships were evacuating their crews, creating a scattered refugee camp in the middle of nowhere. Above them, the 3 Krath ships hovered like black storm clouds. Jake could see their weapon ports glowing as they prepared for another attack. "They are scanning the area," Zethrak said, studying a handheld device, "looking for survivors to capture." "What do they want with prisoners?" Lisa asked. "The Krath use other species as slave labor," replied Dr. Elena Rodriguez, who had been on one of the other ships. "They are not interested in killing everyone. They want workers for their mines and factories." Jake looked around at the hundreds of aliens scattered across the desert. Most of them were injured or exhausted from the evacuation. They had no weapons, no experience with ground combat, and no way to survive in Earth's environment without their equipment. "How long before they land troops?" Jake asked. "Soon," Zethrak replied. "The Krath do not waste time. They will send soldiers to round us up within the hour." Jake studied the terrain around them. The desert was rocky and full of small canyons and hills. It was not ideal for defense, but it offered places to hide and opportunities for ambush tactics. The Krath might be from a death world, but Jake doubted they had trained for guerrilla warfare in Earth's brutal environment. "We need to split up," Jake told the group. "Make it harder for them to capture everyone at once." "But we cannot survive without our equipment," one of the furry aliens protested. "Your planet's atmosphere will kill us within hours. Then we make sure they do not get the chance to hunt us for hours," Jake replied grimly. In the distance, he could see the first Krath landing craft breaking away from the motherships. They were coming down fast and hard, ready to begin the capture operation. Jake checked his watch and estimated they had maybe 30 minutes before the enemy soldiers reached them. He looked at Lisa and Kevin, both of whom were watching him with understanding in their eyes. They knew what he was thinking. Someone had to slow down the Krath advance, giving the aliens time to find better hiding places. "Take care of the wounded," Jake told them. "I am going to see what these Krath soldiers are really made of." Jake moved through the rocky desert, staying low behind the scattered boulders. The Krath landing ships had touched down 2 miles away, and he could already see dust clouds rising as their ground forces spread out across the valley. He carried only his knife, a bottle of water, and a small radio that let him talk to Lisa and the other humans. The first thing Jake noticed about the Krath soldiers was that they were bigger than the peaceful aliens, but not much larger than humans. They stood about 7 feet tall with thick gray skin that looked like leather armor. Their faces were flat with small eyes and wide mouths full of sharp teeth. They moved with the confidence of predators who had never met serious resistance. Jake counted at least 50 Krath warriors spreading out in hunting groups. They carried energy weapons that glowed with red light and wore armor that covered most of their bodies. Behind them came something that made Jake's blood run cold. The war machine stood 12 feet tall and walked on 2 massive legs that shook the ground with each step. Its body was thick and covered in black metal plates, with arms that ended in claws designed for crushing and tearing. Weapon barrels stuck out from its shoulders and chest, and Jake could see a small window where the pilot sat inside the machine's head. "Lisa, do you copy?" Jake whispered into his radio. "I copy, Jake." "What do you see?" 50 soldiers and 1 big robot. They are spreading out to search the area. How are the aliens? Scared and hiding in the caves we found. Most of them can barely breathe in this air even with their masks. Dr. Rodriguez is trying to help the wounded ones. Jake watched as the Krath soldiers began their sweep. They moved in organized groups, checking every hiding place they could find. These were not random raiders, but trained military forces who knew how to hunt efficiently. The war machine walked behind the soldiers, its pilot scanning the area through the machine's sensors. Jake could see gun barrels tracking back and forth as it searched for targets. The machine was designed to fight armies, not individual people, but it would have no trouble crushing anyone it found. Jake moved closer, using the desert terrain to stay hidden. He needed to understand how the war machine worked before he could figure out how to stop it. The Marines had taught him to study his enemy's equipment before engaging in combat. The machine's legs were thick and powerful, but Jake noticed they were not very flexible. The pilot inside had to turn the entire machine to look in different directions, which meant it had blind spots. The weapons were impressive, but seemed designed for fighting other large machines or groups of enemies. A group of Krath soldiers found one of the hiding places where some aliens had taken shelter. Jake heard the musical voices of the peaceful species crying out in fear as the soldiers dragged them from their cave. The gray-skinned warriors bound their prisoners with energy restraints and began marching them toward the landing ships. Jake felt his anger building. These aliens had come to Earth seeking friendship and knowledge, and now they were being captured like animals. He thought about Captain Zethrak's gentle nature and Dr. Rodriguez's dedication to helping others. None of them deserved this. "Jake, more Krath soldiers are moving toward our position," Lisa's voice crackled through the radio. "We might have to run." "Negative," Jake replied. "If you run, they will chase you. These soldiers are trained hunters. Stay hidden and let me try something." Jake began moving toward the war machine, using every bit of cover he could find. The desert was full of small canyons and rock formations that provided concealment, but getting close to the machine meant crossing open ground where the Krath could see him. The machine's pilot was named Commander Thex, though Jake did not know this yet. Thex was a veteran of many battles against peaceful species and had never been defeated in ground combat. His war machine had destroyed entire cities and crushed thousands of enemy soldiers. To him, this was just another easy victory over weak opponents. Jake waited until the machine was investigating a group of rocks near a narrow canyon. The pilot was focused on scanning for hidden aliens and did not expect any real threat. Jake took a deep breath and ran toward the machine as fast as he could. The war machine's sensors detected movement and turned toward Jake. Commander Thex looked through his window and saw a single human running straight at his 12-foot-tall war machine. The Krath pilot laughed through his translator device. "Foolish creature," Thex broadcast through external speakers. "You think to challenge my war machine with no weapons? I have destroyed armies with this machine. You are nothing." Jake did not answer. He was too busy analyzing the machine's design as he ran. The legs had joints that looked vulnerable. The weapon barrels could not aim straight down. The pilot's window was reinforced but might be breakable with the right tools. The war machine raised one of its massive arms to crush Jake, but he rolled to the side at the last second. The mechanical fist smashed into the ground where he had been standing, leaving a crater in the hard desert earth. "You are quick for such a primitive species," Thex admitted, sounding slightly surprised. "But you cannot run forever." The machine turned to follow Jake, but its legs were not designed for quick movements. Jake used his superior speed and agility to stay just out of reach, leading the war machine deeper into the canyon where its size would become a disadvantage. Commander Thex began firing his weapons, sending bolts of red energy that exploded against the canyon walls. The blasts were powerful enough to melt rock, but Jake's combat training had taught him how to use terrain for protection. He ducked and weaved between the shots, never staying in one place long enough for the machine to get a clear target. "Impossible," Thex growled as another volley missed its target. "No species from a primitive world should be this difficult to kill." Jake reached the narrowest part of the canyon and turned to face the war machine. Behind him, the canyon walls rose up on both sides, creating a natural trap. In front of him, the 12-foot-tall machine approached with its weapons charging for another attack. Jake had no guns, no explosives, and no backup. All he had was his training, his knowledge of machines, and the physical advantages that came from growing up on humanity's dangerous world. Commander Thex aimed all of his weapons at the trapped human and prepared to end this annoying interruption to his hunting mission. "This ends now, primitive," the Krath warrior declared. Jake smiled grimly and cracked his knuckles. "Yes, it does." Commander Thex fired all his weapons at once. Red energy bolts screamed through the canyon, exploding against the rock walls where Jake had been standing. Smoke and dust filled the narrow space, and the Krath pilot was certain he had finally killed the annoying human. But when the dust cleared, Jake was gone. Thex looked around frantically through his machine sensors. The canyon seemed empty except for falling rocks and settling dust. Then he heard a sound that made his blood freeze, the screech of metal being torn apart. Jake had used the weapon blast as cover to climb up the canyon wall and drop down onto the war machine's back. His hands found the cooling vents that kept the machine's power systems from overheating. The vents were designed to handle energy weapons and explosions, but not the grip strength of a human who had spent years doing construction work with his bare hands. Jake grabbed the metal grating over the first vent and pulled. The steel bars, bent under his grip, then snapped completely. Sparks flew out of the opening as the machine's cooling system failed. Warning lights began flashing inside Thex's cockpit. "What are you doing?" Thex screamed through his speakers, trying to shake Jake off his machine. But the war machine's arms could not reach its own back, and Jake held on tight as the mechanical giant spun and thrashed. Jake moved to the next cooling vent and tore it apart with his hands. More sparks flew, and he could smell burning metal and melting circuits. The war machine's movements became jerky and unsteady as its systems began shutting down to prevent total failure. Thex tried ramming his machine against the canyon walls to crush Jake, but the human was too quick. Jake jumped from spot to spot, on the machine's back, always staying ahead of the desperate pilot's attempts to stop him. With each destroyed cooling vent, the war machine became weaker and slower. "You cannot do this," Thex shouted. "You are just a primitive from a backwards world. My machine is the ultimate weapon." Jake found the main power coupling that fed energy from the machine's reactor to its weapons. The thick cable was armored with metal stronger than steel, but Jake had learned something important during his years as a marine and construction worker. Every machine had weak points where different parts connected together. He wrapped both hands around the power cable where it connected to the weapon systems and pulled with all his strength. His muscles, built by Earth's heavy gravity and years of hard physical work, strained against the alien technology. The connection held for a moment, then began to bend and crack. "Impossible," Thex whispered, as his weapon systems went offline one by one. Jake tore the power cable completely free and threw it aside. Sparks and electricity arced through the air, but Jake had already moved to his next target. He found the hydraulic lines that controlled the machine's arms and began crushing them with his bare hands. The war machine staggered as its arms stopped working. Thex could no longer control his weapons or use his crushing claws. All he could do was try to step on Jake with his machine's feet, but the human was too fast and too smart to be caught that way. Jake climbed higher on the machine, heading for the cockpit where Thex sat. The Krath pilot watched in terror as the human grabbed the reinforced window that protected him and began pulling at its edges. The transparent material was designed to stop bullets and energy beams, but it was not made to handle the focused strength of someone who could bend steel bars. Cracks appeared in the window, then more cracks. Jake kept pulling and twisting until the entire window frame began to come loose from the machine's head. "Stop," Thex begged. "I surrender. I will. Call off the attack." Jake did not stop. He had seen the Krath soldiers capturing innocent aliens who had only wanted to be friends. He had watched them laugh as they bound their prisoners and dragged them away like animals. There would be no mercy for someone who enjoyed hurting defenseless beings. The window shattered completely, and Jake reached inside the cockpit. Thex tried to fight him, but the Krath warrior was no match for human strength and training. Jake pulled the alien pilot out of his machine and threw him to the ground. Thex landed hard on the canyon floor and tried to run, but his legs were weak from spending so much time inside his machine. Jake caught him easily, and the fight that followed was brief and one-sided. When it was over, Thex lay unconscious in the dirt, and his war machine stood silent and broken. Jake climbed down from the destroyed machine and activated his radio. "Lisa, do you copy?" "Jake? We heard explosions. Are you all right?" "I'm fine. The war machine is down. Tell the aliens they can come out of hiding." Jake looked up at the sky where the 3 Krath ships still hovered. He could see smaller craft, launching from their bays, more landing ships full of soldiers coming to investigate what had happened to their war machine. But something was different now. The new landing ships were not coming down fast and aggressive like before. They were moving carefully like pilots who were suddenly afraid of what they might find on the ground. Within an hour, the Krath forces began retreating to their ships. Jake learned later that the destruction of their invincible war machine had shocked the alien empire's military commanders. No species had ever defeated a planet breaker with primitive tactics and no advanced weapons. Captain Zethrak found Jake sitting on a rock near the destroyed machine, cleaning his cuts and checking his bruises. The alien leader stared at the broken war machine in amazement. "How did you do this?" Zethrak asked. "That machine was designed to destroy entire armies." Jake looked up at the gentle alien captain. "It was just a machine. All machines have weak points if you know where to look. But you had no weapons, no technology. You defeated it with only your hands." Jake shrugged. "Sometimes that is enough." Dr. Elena Rodriguez arrived with medical supplies to treat Jake's injuries. She looked at the destroyed war machine and shook her head in wonder. "The other humans will not believe this when we tell them," she said. "Tell them what?" Jake asked. "That one Marine took down an alien war machine designed to conquer planets." Jake stood up and looked at the retreating Krath ships in the distance. "Tell them that Earth will not be conquered easily. Tell them that humans protect their friends, no matter how impossible the odds look." Captain Zethrak placed a thin hand on Jake's shoulder. "The Galactic Council owes your species a great debt. You have shown us that even the Krath Empire can be defeated." Jake watched the alien ships disappear into space and thought about his sister Lisa in California and his construction crew back in Denver. They were all part of a species that the galaxy had not been ready to meet. Humans who would fight impossible battles to protect innocent people. "Captain," Jake said quietly, "I think your peaceful civilization just got a lot more interesting."